Okay, so thanks for joining me for this session today. So this is actually our 10th grammar clinic session, and the last 9 sessions have been looking at parts of grammar that we can use in our writing assignments, things like that. And today is no different because we are going to be looking at something that we can use to make our writing more informative. Okay? So, if you haven't been to one of our sessions before, my name is Kieran. I am one of your English support tutors on the Manchester campus of Elizabeth School of London. And today we are going to be looking at adding details with relative clauses. Okay, so maybe we know what relative clauses are, maybe we don't, but I can guarantee that you have probably already used them in English without even knowing about them. Okay, so there is our outline for today's session. We're going to recap some little bits of knowledge of making sentences in English just to help us at the start. We're going to have an introduction to relative clauses. Then we're going to look at the two different types of relative clauses, which are, as you can see on the screen, defining and non-defining relative clauses. After that, we will do a little exercise which will test us in our knowledge of relative clauses. Okay, and then we'll finish up with a little bit of a summary about what we have learned. Okay, so let's begin then. So we've got a question here on the screen, and it says, imagine you're in a crowded room, maybe a party or something like that. How would you point out a specific person to your friend? What would you say in this situation?
Say hello.
Okay, that's a good place to start. Yeah, hello is a good place. But you want to describe somebody in this room, but you're not going to kind of point to them. You're going to explain it with your words. So how would you describe somebody in the room that you can see? Any ideas?
Mm. I'm thinking.
Okay, okay. Well, what I can do is I can put an example on the screen now. So you would probably say something like, can you see the tall girl who is wearing a red dress? Okay. Or can you see the man who is wearing red trousers? Or can you see that woman over there who is wearing a dark sweater? Something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how we would normally do it in English. And the way that we do this is by using relative clauses. So the relative clause in this situation is this part, as in the tall girl who is wearing.
To describe her. Or
Yeah, because there might be lots of tall girls, but you're describing the one specifically wearing a red dress. Yeah. Okay. So this part here, the girl who is wearing a red dress, this is an example of a relative clause. Okay. All right.
yeah.
So that is what we're going to be having a look at in our session today. Okay. So by the end of this lesson, hopefully we will understand a little bit better relative clauses and how they can improve our writing. And we will also write some sentences using relative clauses, starting with who, which, where, when, whose, and that. Okay, so it's going to be quite an interactive session today. Okay, so let's have a little recap about some basic bits of grammar in English. So every sentence in English needs a subject and a verb, like I slept yesterday. Okay. But most sentences have a subject, a verb, and an object. Okay. So the subject is the person or a thing that is doing something. Okay. The verb is the action that is happening, And the object is the person or thing who is receiving, who is getting the action. Right? So
Yes.
we have an example sentence here at the bottom of Chris designed the new gallery. So Chris is the subject because he is the person or she is the person who does the action. Designed is the verb because that is the action. And the new gallery is the object because the gallery is the thing that is being designed. Okay, so most sentences follow that structure: subject, verb, and object. Okay, so we need to remember this information when it comes to relative clauses because we will need to use subjects and verbs and objects. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are relative clauses is a very good question. So relative clauses are those parts of the sentences that provide some extra information about the noun. Okay, so they usually begin with words like who or which or that or whose. Okay, so they give more detail about the noun and they help to define it or to give it some extra information. So a normal sentence would be, like we saw, Chris designed the new gallery. But we also have here a relative clause, which is Chris, who is an architect, designed the gallery. Okay? So this information here, who is an architect, tells us some extra information about Chris. Okay, so does
Yeah.
that make sense, Maria? Yeah?
Yes, yes. Of course.
Okay. All right, very good. So when we make relative clauses, we always need to use these words like who, which, that, whose. Okay, so they are 4 of them, but we're actually going to be looking at the 6 different words that we can use. So the first one we use is who. Okay, and who is used to describe people. So the example is I have a friend who volunteers at the museum. So the who part is describing the friend.
Yeah.
We can also use a relative clause using which. So which describes animals or things. Okay, we don't really use it with people. It's much better to use who for people, but which for things and objects. In the example sentence, it tells us the sculpture, which is displayed in the museum, is a masterpiece. So which is describing the sculpture. And the last one that we have on this page, at least, is where. So as you can imagine, where describes a place. And in the example, it says, I went to the museum where the dinosaur exhibition took place. So the where describes the museum. Okay. So those are the 3 we have now. We will have 3 more coming up. Can you imagine what those 3 are, Maria?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they are going to be similar words, probably beginning with WH. Okay. So our next one is when.
When.
Okay. And when, again, as you can imagine, talks about a specific time. So the example sentence tells us the day when the art gallery opened was memorable. The when part of the sentence is describing the day because that's a specific time. Okay, now
Yeah.
the next one is going to get a little bit more difficult, and that is the word whose. Okay, so whose often gets confused with who, which we looked at before. But whose, this is where it gets a bit more difficult. Whose talks about the possession of a person. So it is an object which belongs to a person. Okay. So in the example, it tells us the painter whose collection we admired. So this tells us that the collection is owned by or is created by the painter. Okay. All right. So it tells us about the object related to the person. So that leads us on to the last relative pronoun, which we use as that. Okay. And that is a useful one because it can talk about people, it can talk about animals, and it can talk about things. Okay. So we can use it for many different situations. And in the example, it tells us there is a cat that likes to sleep. Okay. So that is relating to the cat. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the 6 relative pronouns we're going to be looking at today. Okay. So when we start a relative clause, we need to use one of those 6 words. Okay. So let's now look at relative clauses again in detail because we've said that they can define a noun or they can give extra information about a noun. And in those 2 situations, they are a different type of relative clause. So the relative clause we're going to look at, first of all, is called a defining relative clause. And it is called a defining relative clause because the relative clause gives the definition of the noun that we're looking at. It gives essential information. If the relative clause is not there, then the sentence does not make any sense. Okay, so if you look at this sentence, this is the golden coin that was found in the cave. If we remove this information, then the sentence doesn't really have any logic. Sorry. This is the golden coin. But which one? Which one are we talking about? So we need to include this information because it defines the golden coin. Okay. So like we've just seen, it provides essential information. And if we remove the information, the sentence would be unclear. Okay. So that is a defining relative clause. The opposite is, as you can imagine, a non-defining relative clause. Okay, so this is when the relative clause gives some information, but this information is not essential to the sentence. It gives some extra detail, some added detail, but if you remove it from the sentence, it still has some logic. So if we remove it here, we will see that the sentence is the golden coin was found in the cave. That has a full sense, a full idea, but we can just add in the relative clause to give some extra information. Right, so let's look at these 2 in a bit more detail. We're going to begin with the first one, the defining relative clause. Okay. So there is an example here on the left. I want to buy the painting that depicts the mountain. The relative clause here is that depicts a mountain. Okay? Because this information tells us which specific painting we're talking about. Okay? If we don't include this information, we don't know what painting is being described. Okay, so this is the information that we need, and that is why it's called a defining relative clause. So your task now, Maria, is you need to make a sentence for yourself by using portrait and museum, and you need to make a relative clause with one of these pronouns that we have here. So it could be who or which or where or when or whose or that. Okay. So can you think of a sentence that includes both of those things and a relative clause like one of these here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
The portrait is my mother.
Oh, can you say that?
It was
Can you say that again, please, Maria? There was a bit of a bad connection for a second.
Yeah, I think my connection is not very well. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. The portrait,
Mm-hmm.
whose is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can sell you
Mm-hmm.
in the museum.
In the museum.
I don't know if
Oh.
my connection is
Okay, yeah.
in the
I got
museum.
that one. I got that one, yeah. So in that sentence, it should be like the portrait which belongs to my mother. I can sell you in the museum. Okay.
Yeah.
You could also put it another way. My mother, whose portrait is in the museum, I can sell you, or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
all right. So well done, Maria. Okay.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. So here's just an example answer. The portrait that was painted by Sarah is displayed in the museum. So our relative clause is this part. We've got the portrait, we've got the museum, and then we've got the relative clause beginning with that. Okay. All right. So well done there. So that is the defining clause. Now let's look at the non-defining clause, which gives extra information. So we've got two sentences here. Kent was making a clay vase yesterday, and it also tells us he loves art lessons. So we've got two bits of information there. Okay. So the second sentence gives us a little bit of extra information to the first one. And in that situation, we can turn it into a relative clause. So we can say Kent, who loves art lessons, was making a clay vase yesterday. So again, it is non-defining if it gives extra information, and we can remove the information and the sentence still makes sense. So if we take away this information, it is Kent was making a clay vase yesterday. So that's logical on its own. So this information is just non-essential information. So in that situation, we add a comma before the relative clause and we add a comma after the relative clause. So that tells us that it is a non-defining relative clause. Okay? Another thing that helps us here is when we see the comma, that tells us that when we're speaking, we need to pause. Okay? So if we were reading this sentence, we would say, Kent, who loves art lessons, was making a clay vase yesterday. Okay? So it is like a visual representation that you need to pause at those points. All right, so that is non-defining, it's extra information, and it has commas before and after the clause. All right, so as you can see here, with the non-defining clause, we've got who, so we know that who refers to Kent, the person or object that comes before it. Okay, so when we have a relative pronoun, it is always talking about something before it in the sentence. Okay, so let's have a little quiz now to check the information that we already have learned so far. Okay, so we've got two sentences here. The girl is staring out the window. The girl is wearing an orange dress. So we've got two sentences. We need to connect them together, all right, using a relative clause. So, Maria, can you tell me how we could combine those sentences together with a relative clause?
Yes. The girl who is wearing an orange dress
Mm-hmm.
is starting out the window.
All right, very good, very good. Okay. Or the other way around, the girl who is staring out of the window is wearing an orange dress. Okay. All right. So well done. Well done there. Good construction. And if you look at this sentence, and if you have a look at this sentence, then the girl who is staring out of the window. There are probably many girls, but we are talking about this one specific girl. So this makes it a defining relative clause. Okay? Also, there are no commas. So that tells us again, it is a defining relative clause. All right, so question 2. Again, we have 2 sentences that we need to connect together using a relative clause. So can you do that for me, Maria?
Yeah. The portrait, which has been with the art museum in the Paris since 1084,
Okay.
804. Yeah. Is one of the most famous painting in the world.
All right, very good. Well done with that one. Okay, so
Thank you.
yeah, good, good, good. So when we put it together, yeah, like exactly like you said, this portrait, which has been with the Art Museum in Paris since 1804, is one of the most famous in the world. Okay. And if we notice here, there is a comma before, a comma after. So that tells us it is a non-defining relative clause. Okay, so it gives us some extra information. And if we remove the information, the sentence still has a logic and a meaning to it. This portrait is one of the most famous in the world. Okay.
Yeah.
So well done there with your answers. That was very good. So now
Thank
we have
you.
now we've got a different quiz for you. Okay. In the next quiz, you will just need to choose the correct relative pronoun. Okay. So you will just need to read the
Yeah.
sentence and find out, are you using who, which, where, when, whose, or that. All right. So read the sentence and then just decide which word to use.
I think it's who.
It is definitely who. Well done. Very good. Very good. Okay, so Michael
Thank
is a
you.
person, so we use who. All right, the next one.
I think it's where.
It is definitely where. Very
We
good.
visited the museum
Hmm.
where
Where the dinosaur fossils were displayed last year. Very good.
right.
Good. All right, so that is describing a museum, which is a place. So that's why we use where. Okay. Right, on to number 3. So tell me what you think is the answer here.
I think it's which the
Okay.
day, which the it's
All right. I would say maybe focus here. It's talking about day. So if we're talking about a time, which word would we use?
when.
Okay, good, good. Okay. So the relative pronoun always describes something before it in a sentence. Okay? So because it
Yeah.
describes day, it's talking about a time, so we use when. Okay, good work. Number 14 then. Oh, sorry, number 4. Forgive me. Yeah.
Uh, I think it's that. The
Okay.
arrows that
Oh,
it's
all
made.
right. So this is a rule that we didn't mention before. So normally that would be possible, or which would be possible, yeah, because both which and that describe objects. Okay. So normally, if we're talking about an object, we would use which or we would use that. Either of them is okay.
Yeah,
But
we can use
but
both.
but this is a very very specific rule is if it is a defining sentence, we can use which or that. But if it is a non-defining, then we can only use the word which. Okay. And if we look at this sentence, there is a comma before, there is a comma after. So that means it is
I
a,
see.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
which.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. So it's a non-defining sentence. So it must use which instead. Okay. So well done with that. Good work. So
Thank you.
question number 5.
Uh,
Okay. What do you think for this one?
I need to understand first. Sorry.
No problem.
Now can can use that, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, what I will tell you is that the histories the histories belong to the Egyptian people. So if we're talking about something belongs to somebody or is owned by someone or is the possession of someone,
Who's
a very good, very good.
who's
All right, very good. Okay. So another example of this could be, like Sarah, whose husband is a chef, has 3 children or something like that, because the husband is
yeah.
the possession of Sarah. Okay. So the histories belong to the Egyptians. Now we have one more question here. So just one more relative pronoun to use.
Which which
Okay.
sits.
Yeah. So in this situation, you could use which or you could use that. Both of them are fine. On the screen, it will tell you that it is that, but which is also okay as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So both of them are good. Because this is a defining relative clause, both of them are okay. Right. So based off that, then let's summarize what we've looked at. Okay. So relative clauses give some extra information about a noun in a sentence.
Provided.
Yeah. Okay. And they either give us some specific information or they give us some additional information. They usually begin with these relative pronouns like who, which, where, when, whose, and that. Defining relative clauses give us the essential information to identify the noun. So it makes it a very specific noun. And non-defining give extra, additional, non-essential information, and they can be removed from the sentence. But you need to have a comma before them, and you need to have a comma after them. Okay, so a little bit of homework here. So I'm going to give you a little assignment to do. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's going to be very simple. You will just need to select a famous business person. It can be somebody real, like Jeff Bezos or I don't know, Elon Musk, if that's someone you're interested in, or it can be somebody imaginary as well. Okay. And you will need to write 3 sentences about that business person, and you will need to describe them by using relative clauses to highlight some specific details about their life. So you might
Yeah.
like to think about the industry that they work in and the time period that they are in or they were from, okay? And just write 3 sentences using relative clauses to describe them. So you can do that at home in your own time, and you can send your answers to us at this email address that you can see on the screen here. So English support
Support. Yeah.
underscore Manchester WH at esl.ac.uk. Okay. Is that
Yeah.
okay for you, Maria? Yeah.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
very good, very good. Okay, and for anybody else watching, if you ever need any help at all from your English support tutors, then please do email that address and we can help you with presentation skills, assignment skills, more general academic skills like reading and listening, and we can also help you both online and in person on campus. And if you're ever a little bit bored in the evenings or at the weekends, you can always have a look at our YouTube page using this QR code that we have on the screen. And all
Yes.
the sessions that we have are recorded and they are uploaded there to be available 24/7 all year round.
I started watching this video, but in my spare time.
All right. That's a
Yeah.
very good idea. Well done with that, Maria. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to finish up now. We're going to finish the recording. So thank you, everybody, for joining us
Thank you
today.
very much. Thank you.
Okay.